G'day guys, back with the Circle. Let's have a look at some previews from last night. So, Age of Sigmar, we have a Giants faction. They're just their own faction now, I guess, or something you add in. Yeah, it's fine. I like this look a bit more than the old Giants. I hate that really lanky pot-belly design though. So, something a little bit more broad, I think is a bit better. These guys have chunkier legs, they're chunky boys. Yeah, it's an improvement. They're huge though, absolutely monstrously huge, which it's fine. It's fine. I don't really know how it's really improving the game by making them so hideously huge and therefore prohibitively expensive, but well, so be it. Looks to me like they're going to be as big as monoliths, and being new plastics, I don't really see these selling for much cheaper than 200, 250 Australian dollars. So yeah, prohibitively expensive, I would class that as. And you can get an idea of the size just looking at this here. So, 50% bigger, if not more, than the old Giant from the looks of it. I refuse to call them Gargants. I don't give a fuck about their copyright names. Blackstone Fortress. I really like the look of these larger spindle drones. It is clear, though, that they've used the exact same model for both of the models you're looking at right now. The hands are the same way, with the hand on the left side of it. As it looks at us, is raised up higher, and the other one's held lower, and they've both got cracks at the same point in their little, the little protrusion or headdress on top. That's fine for what it's doing. I think these would make a great unit in certain factions, certain armies, convert it in, maybe 30k. There's a little project I have that's going to use these sort of things, so it's good they released them. Warcry, they released some Elves, and it does nothing for me. Does nothing for me at all. Can't really say anything positive there. Just Elves are always at their best when they're well proportioned and they use their graceful lines wisely, and smart poses. These with the cloaks and stuff, the way they look, I don't know. Like the old Dark Elf Corsairs, they really nailed the look of what I like in my Dark Elves, and these are nothing like that. So, yeah, it's fine, just does nothing for me. This thing here, I've been trying to think of different ways to describe the goop, the black goo from Prometheus that's coming out of her chalice of coals. It looks terrible. I'm guessing it's just meant to be wafts of smoke and incense, but I think it looks fucking hideous. It almost, with that gigantic headdress and the weird belt she's got on, looks like maybe like Lady Olinda from the Nighthaunt before she died. I don't know. I don't like the look of it. Does, again, nothing for me as a model. Granted, it's a crazy, weird fantasy setting, Age of Sigmar. But I like my designs to have some practicality. Like a giant headdress like that on a ghost, that's fine. But imagine this young elf woman on a battlefield. It just doesn't work for me. You maybe do something fun with it in a diorama, something like that. Snotlings for Blood Bowl. I have an old Blood Bowl Snotling Horde sitting up in my shelf behind me, the old white metal ones. Maybe I'll give them away to someone. I actually want to do a giveaway soon. A whole Blood Bowl box set with the human team, the orc team, and a couple of heroes added in. Or not heroes, what do you call them? The pro players. I forget. Yeah, they're fine. They're fine. I like this little dude. Looks like Mickey Mouse in Fantasia with his little wizard robe on there. Should have given him a broomstick and really sold the point. Horus Heresy. Okay. Saul Tarvet's got a model, which is very bizarre. They sort of said they were never going to do it. The rock looks like a plastic, and I thought maybe he's plastic, but Warhammer community has said, no, he's resin. So, why does he look like Sylvester Stallone with a long blonde wig, doing his best Kevin Sorbo or He-Man cosplay? That was never how I saw Saul or his artwork. The sword, the blade looks fantastic, but it's almost like they took the Forge World Champion, actually. I've got Eidolon up, but I'll pull up the Forge World Champion. It's almost like they took this champion model here with his, the way he's standing with that one knee up pose. And he's in for his children, but that's just coincidental. With that one knee up pose and the grip he's got on the sword, this sort of underhanded grip on the left hand, overhand grip on the right hand, and that big Aquila cross guard that he's got on there, and they've almost done the exact same thing for Saul, and it doesn't work. That cross guard of the big sort of skull and wings Aquila doesn't work for me. I'm not exactly sure, but I think it would look better just without it, or maybe something else like the Palatine blades have, like some sort of phoenix, like single-edged phoenix wing design. Like that double-sided crossguard doesn't look right on that one-edged sort of Kopesh, scimitar, whatever you want to call it, blade. So that's my main criticism, that and the fact that he looks like Sylvester Stallone. Oh, Adrian, we gotta kill some word bearers. Also, why has he got Tarvets written on his... Like, I'm criticising paint job here, okay? So that's nothing to do with the actual model itself, just the paint job they've chosen to pre-build with, okay? Why does he have his name written? Like, is that his name badge so people know who he is? The blinged out guy who's clearly probably a praetor? They would probably know one another's heraldry, or when they look at someone, a little ID chip will show up in their vision to say, you know, you're looking at Trooper X, Y, Z, whatever. Well, he probably doesn't need to advertise his name. It would probably have something like, you know, Emperor's Children, or I don't know, Kemnos, their home planet, for example. It might say instead. That would make a lot more sense. So, just a minor critique. Again, it's paint job. It's painted in the most uninspired Games Workshop style. Now, my main gripe, apart from the little things like the sword, is why is he more busy and blinged out than Eidolon? Eidolon, a notoriously vain and vapid member. The equal second highest ranking commander of the Emperor's Children. And keep in mind, Saul is just a captain of one of the companies of the Emperor's Children. And this guy here, yeah, he's his boss. Okay? Now look at Eidolon. Let's start with the legs. Eidolon has a little bit of filigree on the right leg, left leg, a little bit more filigree, and a couple of wings and an arrow. Okay? We'll look at Saul. Saul's entire outer side of his greaves is covered in iconography. On top of that, his knees are also heavily covered in iconography. Their chests, well, Saul has a more down-to-earth chest, just a Palatine Aquila with the strapping for his sniper rifle over the top, which probably necessitated making it a much more refined chest. Eidolon, Palatine Aquila with two little white laurel wreaths going up either side of it, and his little Vox grill for his Sonic Shrieker or whatever he's got. And he's got his two little belt daggers hanging off of that. So I'd say Eidolon has the more fancy chest. Then we go to shoulder pads. Eidolon's left shoulder pad, large Palatine Aquila, as you can see, and a tiny little bit of laurel wreath. Saul Tarvet's Palatine Aquila, but it's smaller, and then the rest of it is covered in laurel wreaths. The right shoulder pad on Saul, much busier than Eidolon's shoulder pad, which is just the Emperor's Children 3 with a couple of wreaths. It looks like Saul might have something similar to what the Palatine blades have, with like the little face emblem with some gold wreaths around it. I'm not sure. Then we get to forearms, and close that champion away. Just keep clicking on it. Eidolon, just tiny little bit of filigree on each arm. And then, of course, Saul, arms covered in quills. So I'd say, apart from the chest and the left shoulder pad, Saul is busier than Eidolon in every way. And Eidolon, again, notoriously vain and vapid commander of the Emperor's Children. Saul was never like that. Saul was, for an Emperor's Children Marine, very down to earth. Barely distinguishable from the line companies, to the point that he would get derided upon by the other Emperor's Children. What, don't you think you're good enough to show off, basically, was their attitude. Almost frowned upon. Bit of an outsider, as it were, which made him a real stark contrast to Lucius, who was very blingy, very proud of himself, thought he was the best at everything, and those two, of course, great friends in the novels, and therefore, yeah, it builds up the relationship. So, for me, this model doesn't work for those reasons. Partly because I have problems with the sculpt, but partly because it's not representing the character of this miniature as he's always been described to us or previous artwork has shown. Which is, he's actually a pretty down-to-earth guy. Not a guy who's so blinged up that he can rival Eidolon for sheer bling. Again, put Eidolon's shoulder pad onto Saul, and Saul would be far more blingy than Eidolon is. That doesn't seem right to me. But I'd be interested to see what other people think about the matter. Anyway, moving along. Psychic Awakening. Xerus? Is that the best way to pronounce it? Xerus? Either way, fucking awesome model. Fantastic update, 10 out of 10. This is what I want to see in models. It's busy, but they've given the model enough size and space to spread out what's busy about it. It's all about balance and proportion. If this model was the same size as the old one was, or smaller, so basically half the size he is now, it'd be a different story if he was this busy. But because of his size, the proportions work so much better. This is what I'm asking for in models. Now again, my opinion is just that. It's what I personally prefer and what I personally whinge about. But I look at this here and I'm like, that is great. Yeah, he's got the syndrome that a lot of others do. Recently that I've spoken about, he has to have these weird rocks on his base he's taking a step back up onto behind him. But it works better here because of his 4 legs, the balance issues and that kind of thing. It's fine. So, good. Great, works. The poor little guy that's being sucked up off the ground by being disintegrated with gauze, that's fantastic. The bones and the flesh all just being siphoned away off his skin. Great. Yeah, give me more of that. That is grimdark, just the way I like it. And it's a nice, tiny little laser beam going into him, not some big, booming, electrical, lightning bolt-shaped zapping motion going into him, which I think was probably the temptation that was there, to put some massive beam of energy, like lightning bolts zigzagged going into the guy. No, just tiny little light beam, and then they're letting the... this is an appropriate use, by the way. I always complain, like I did earlier on the High Elf, of the way they do their smoke and flame effects. They're often not necessary, or overdone on the model. In this case it works because it's an actual fluid visibly being picked up and drained off him, as opposed to some etheric energy in the air which is intangible. So therefore, works so much better. And that's the kind of thing I like in a model. So, I have nothing but praise for this. The blades are large, but in comparison to the scale of the model, they work. They're quite well proportioned. They're not much bigger than the forearms on him, each blade. So, okay, cool, good size. He has the 4 limbs, and they're doing interesting things with those limbs. Fantastic. Great. More of that. Again, the model has a lot going on, but glowing green eye in the middle of his face. I have a focal point. Yes, there are other things that might draw your attention, but the reds just below where it's swirling are muted reds. Good. The green up on that little crystal on his shoulder, it's a much darker jade. Therefore, it doesn't pull your eye in as much as that bright green eye does in the middle of his head. Whoever did this, more designs like this, please. This is great model making 101. I have a center of focus, and then I've got some great details I immediately can pick out around that. Because I look at that primary colour, that bright green, and then I notice, okay, he's got like this little belt buckle that's green, he's of course got the weapon. What else he got? Oh, okay, there's those tiny little green canisters wrapped around his wrist, and he's obviously sucking apart all the life force from that guy who forms the second focal point. And where's it brightest? Where the blood and viscous fluids are coming off the guy's head, so it's drawing your eye straight to that area as a great focal point, or a second focal point on the miniature. So both the model's faces are immediately areas you are drawn to. Perfect. Just want to reiterate, this is the sort of stuff you look for in a miniature that is often lacking. Okay, when I criticize something like Rabute Gilliman, or maybe aspects of Gazkul, perhaps, the Demon Primarchs, this is why, because they don't have this kind of great design, and this is my methodology for picking it. They also have this Inquisitor here. I'm assuming it's a chick based on the face, I'm not quite sure. Yeah, she's a radical using the weapons of her enemies against them. She looks kind of elvish. But the thing is, this is Codius. It's that same pose as Codius. So just like how I said that Saul Tarvitz rips off the exact pose of the champion. Well, what have we got? Right hand, right arm down, holding the weapon. Yes. We have our familiar, in this case on Codius, is the twin-headed eagle versus this tiny little dragon thing. Okay, they're both wearing a clearly non-standard type of power armor. It's their own sort of medieval-looking armor, right down to like the forearms, the vambraces, having that little peak and a ridge line running up the center of them. Same thing. She has, obviously, the shuriken. He's got his thunder hammer. She's got this big shoulder pad with some sort of skull on it. And both of them have he's got the fur instead of the skull. Both of them have that left knee up a little bit and standing on tiny, tiny little rock. That's the same fucking model, basically. I don't know. Doesn't make it bad. Just looks a bit lazy to me. I want to see something new and unique. Like slapping a shuriken and a little dragon on a model isn't enough for me to really float my boat, as it were. I have no interest in buying this whatsoever, because I'm like, I've owned this model before, therefore I've basically painted this model before. I know that sounds a bit silly, probably, because they do seem different in some ways, but frankly, it does nothing for me. We also have some more releases coming out later on down the line. We've got this Sister of Battle here. This picture looks a lot better, but when you see the model without any like background, not zoomed in like that, oh, she is hideous. Alright, look at this. Look at the face on it. On the left in the artwork, you have this really effeminate, beautiful looking woman. You know, yeah, she's scarred and stuff like that, it's fine. But look at the one on the right. Her nose is flattened out, doesn't have that crisp, pointy peak. Her lips, she's got these very wide mouth on her, very much like a man does, as opposed to a woman. Probably because the eyes and nose and mouth ratios are all thrown off on the physical model. Also, the hairline, the hair is much, much higher up on the forehead. Now, I'm not saying that they needed to recreate the artwork perfectly, no. But these are the little differences that dramatically change how a model looks. And at the end of the day, sculpting men seems to be something Games Workshop does very well. Sculpting women is something they seem to do rather poorly on. Go and look at something like Cool Mini or not. Look at Edgar Skoromowski's work, perhaps, over there doing stuff like Chronicles of Hate, or look at their work on Game of Thrones, and you can see, even in inferior plastics, how much detail they get into their female faces compared to Games Workshop. I don't know whether it's just sculpts, or whether the paint is also amplifying it, but they are not good with women's faces. Frankly, the Sisters of Battle range are fugly. They are fugly women. And there is nothing wrong with having attractive women in your sci-fi, especially if your artwork has a bunch of attractive women. Instead, what we have is a bunch of women who have had their noses repeatedly broken, but nothing else, which is neat. So, yeah. That's my thoughts on that particular model. As for the Librarian, yep, it's another Space Marine Librarian. He's got a bit of a Grey Knight feel going on, though, with his little wrist-mounted Stormbolter, so perhaps he would make a good Grey Knight Librarian. Yeah, that's all I really think about these previews. Games Workshop can't sculpt women's faces. They're just... so bad. So bad. Anyway. That's it. Back with the Outer Circle. Hope you enjoyed this episode. And see you all again sooner rather than later, I hope.